The air inside Ironcliff Base's main armory tasted like gun oil and possibility. It was 0600 hours on a Tuesday that would change everything. Though the woman kneeling in the corner didn't know that yet. She only knew the weight of the rifle in her hands and the ritual her father had taught her 20 years ago. Staff Sergeant Elena Hartley moved through the disassembly with the precision of a surgeon. Barrett M82A1, 50 caliber, 30 pounds of engineered violence capable of punching through engine blocks at a mile. The bolt carrier group came apart in her hands like a familiar prayer. Recoil spring, barrel assembly, each piece laid out on the cleaning mat in perfect order, the same order every time, because consistency was the foundation of everything that mattered. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed in their fixtures, casting that cold, institutional white that made shadows look sharper than they should. Rows of weapon racks lined the walls. M4s, M240s, grenade launchers, anti-materiel rifles locked behind reinforced glass. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. And in this moment, at this hour, Elena Hartley had the armory entirely to herself. Her hands moved without conscious thought. Wipe down the bolt face. Check the firing pin channel. Inspect the gas system for carbon buildup. The movements were meditation, the kind her father had drilled into her from the age of 8, when most girls were playing with dolls. Jack Hartley hadn't believed in childhood. He'd believed in legacy. The badge on her sleeve caught the light as she reached for the cleaning solvent. Small, matte black, easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking at. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. Most people wouldn't have known what it meant. 3,200 meters. Confirmed. 2 miles, give or take. The kind of distance that didn't exist in the training manuals because the training manuals were written by people who understood human limitations. The kind of distance that required you to account for the Earth's rotation, for temperature gradients at different altitudes, for wind patterns that changed every 100 meters of bullet flight, the kind of distance that separated competence from legend. Elena didn't think about the badge. She thought about the rifle, about the mathematics of ballistics, about the breath control that kept her heartbeat steady when it mattered most. Thinking about the badge meant thinking about her father, and thinking about her father meant remembering the way his hands had shaken in those final years, the way guilt had eaten him alive from the inside out. She was halfway through reassembling the lower receiver when she heard the footsteps. They echoed on the concrete with the measured cadence of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to be in a hurry. Elena didn't look up. Officers came through here regularly, inspecting, evaluating, looking for the crack in the armor that would justify another round of budget reviews and efficiency reports. The footsteps stopped. General Theodore Brennan stood 15 feet away, 4 stars on his shoulder, 31 years of service written in the lines of his face. He'd walked through armories in Kuwait, in Germany, in a dozen places where America kept its weapons ready and its intentions classified. He knew what discipline looked like. He knew what excellence looked like. And he knew, without fail, when something didn't fit the pattern. His eyes moved across the space with practiced efficiency. Inventory racks, maintenance stations, enlisted personnel at their assigned positions. Everything standard, everything routine. Then he saw her, the woman in the corner, kneeling beside a disassembled Barrett, working with the kind of focus that suggested the rest of the world had ceased to exist. Her uniform was regulation perfect, hair pulled back in a tight bun, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing that didn't serve a tactical purpose. Brennan barely registered her. Just another tech doing maintenance. He kept walking, but something stopped him. A flicker at the edge of awareness, the way a shadow moves wrong or a sound doesn't quite match the environment. The same instinct that had kept him alive in the Gulf when the Republican Guard had everyone's position and air support was 30 minutes out. He turned back. The woman was still kneeling, now using a torque wrench on the barrel assembly. Her movements were economical, certain, no wasted motion, no hesitation. The kind of proficiency that came from repetition measured in thousands of hours, not hundreds. Then Brennan saw the badge. It was pinned just below her unit patch, small and unassuming. Most people would have walked right past it. Most people wouldn't have understood what the numbers meant. Brennan understood. He'd spent enough time studying ballistics data, enough years reviewing sniper reports from every theater of operation, to know exactly what 3,200 meters represented. The longest confirmed sniper kill in modern military history, according to every database he had access to, was 3,540 meters. A Canadian JTF-2 operator, 2017, Iraq. It had taken perfect conditions, a team of spotters, and a shot that analysts still debated as part skill, part divine intervention. This soldier had a badge claiming a shot within 340 meters of that record. Brennan's jaw tightened. His pulse kicked up, not from anger, but from something closer to disbelief. He stepped forward, boots echoing in the sudden silence. "Soldier," his voice cut through the armory like a blade through silk. Every tech within earshot stopped what they were doing. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, the way pressure drops before a storm. Elena looked up. Her eyes were gray, calm, the color of winter sky over Montana mountains. She didn't flinch, didn't scramble to attention. She just met his gaze with a kind of stillness that felt deliberate, earned. "Sir," no inflection, no nervousness, just acknowledgement. Brennan pointed at the badge, his finger steady despite the chaos spinning up in his mind. "Explain that." Elena glanced down at her sleeve, then back up at him. Her expression didn't change. "It's a marksmanship achievement badge, sir, awarded for confirmed long-range engagement." "I know what it is." Brennan's voice dropped lower, edged with something sharp. "I'm asking how you have it." The armory had gone completely silent now. Every tech, every specialist, every officer within 30 feet was watching. This wasn't routine anymore. This was something else entirely. Elena set down her torque wrench with careful precision, resting it on the mat beside the partially assembled rifle. She stood, not hurried, just efficient. 5'7", maybe 140 soaking wet. The kind of frame that looked fragile until you saw the way she moved. All controlled power and zero wasted energy. "I earned it, sir." Brennan felt his pulse kick higher. That distance wasn't in the training manuals. It wasn't in the doctrine. It existed in the realm of theoretical possibility, the kind of thing analysts discussed over coffee and dismissed as statistically improbable when accounting for human factors. "That distance isn't standard," he said, keeping his voice level. "It's barely in the realm of physics." "Respectfully, sir," Elena said, her tone unchanged. "It's in the record." "Whose record?" "Mine." The word hung in the air like smoke. Brennan stared at her. She stared back. No challenge in her expression, no pride, just fact, delivered with the same emotional weight as a weather report. Captain Morris, Brennan's aide, cleared his throat from somewhere behind them. Young, competent, the kind of officer who made the machine run but never questioned the destination. "Sir, should I pull her file?" "Yes." Brennan didn't look away from Elena. "Now." Morris's fingers moved across his tablet with practiced efficiency. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 15. Then Morris's face went pale in a way that made Brennan's instincts spike. "Sir, it's restricted." Brennan turned sharply. "What?" "Her service record. I can access the basics, but most of it's flagged, redacted. I'd need higher clearance to see the details." Brennan's eyes narrowed. He'd been a 4-star general for 6 years. There were maybe a dozen people in the entire military structure with higher clearance. And yet here he was, staring at a file that treated him like he didn't have the need to know. He turned back to Elena. "What's your name?" "Staff Sergeant Elena Hartley, sir." Hartley. The name hit him like a round to the chest plate. Hartley. He knew that name. Had known a man with that name decades ago, in a different war when the world was simpler and the enemy wore uniforms you could actually see. Jack Hartley, Brennan said slowly, watching her face for reaction. You related? For the first time, something shifted in Elena's expression. Not much, just a microscopic tightening around her eyes, the kind of tell that suggested pain so old it had calcified into armor. He was my father, sir. The armory might as well have been vacuum sealed. No one breathed, no one moved. Brennan's mind spun back through the years. 1991, Kuwait, the chaos after Desert Storm, when everyone thought the war was over, but the dying hadn't stopped. Jack Hartley had been 38 then, a gunnery sergeant with a reputation for impossible shots and unshakable discipline. He'd trained Brennan in the fundamentals of long-range shooting, had shown him how to read wind in the desert where mirages turned reality into liquid, and nothing was what it seemed. Jack Hartley had also been the most haunted man Brennan had ever met. How long have you been at Ironcliff? Brennan asked, his voice quieter now. 8 months, sir. And before that? A pause. Not long, just enough to be noticeable. Just enough to suggest that whatever came next was going to be carefully chosen. Deployment rotation, sir. Details are classified. Morris spoke up from behind his tablet. Sir, her MOS is listed as 11B, infantry, with additional skill identifier B4, sniper qualified. Current assignment shows armory operations, but previous assignments are, he trailed off. Redacted, Brennan finished. I heard you the first time. He stepped closer to Elena, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I knew your father, trained with him in '91, right before the push into Iraq. He was the best shooter I ever met, also the most broken. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or pain, hard to tell which. He taught me everything I know about long-range work, Brennan continued, but he never made a shot like the one on that badge. Never even came close. So I need you to explain to me how Jack Hartley's daughter is wearing a badge for something that shouldn't be possible. Elena held his gaze for 3 full seconds. When she spoke, her voice was steady, certain, and completely devoid of emotion. My father got to 2,600 meters before the math beat him, sir. I went 600 meters further. I finished what he started. The words landed like artillery. Brennan felt them in his chest, in his throat, in the part of his brain that still remembered Jack Hartley's hands shaking over a rifle. He couldn't bring himself to fire anymore. He wanted to ask more, wanted to demand explanations, details, proof. But something in Elena's eyes stopped him. The same thing he'd seen in her father's eyes all those years ago. The weight of something carried alone for too long. Brennan straightened, turned on his heel, and walked toward the exit. Morris, conference room, 10 minutes. Yes, sir. As Brennan pushed through the armory doors, morning sunlight hit him like a physical force. He stood on the top step, breathing in air that tasted like desert dust and aviation fuel, trying to shake the feeling crawling up his spine. Jack Hartley had been brilliant. Jack Hartley had been broken. And now Jack Hartley's daughter was kneeling in an armory with a badge that represented something her father had died trying to achieve. 10 minutes later, he sat in conference room C, staring at a tablet screen that refused to cooperate. Morris had pulled everything he could access on Staff Sergeant Elena Hartley. It wasn't much. Name, Hartley, Elena J. Rank, E6, Staff Sergeant. MOS, 11B, Infantry, with additional skill identifier, B4, Sniper. Current assignment, Ironcliff Base, Armory Operations. Previous assignments, redacted. Deployments, redacted. Commendations, redacted. The only concrete details were skeletal. Age, 29. Hometown, Billings, Montana. Enlistment date, 11 years prior. Everything else, everything that actually mattered, was locked behind security walls that required authorization Brennan didn't have. Which made no sense. Morris stood near the door, clearly uncomfortable. Sir, I've requested access escalation, but it could take hours, days, I know. Brennan set the tablet down harder than necessary. Tell me what you can see. Morris scrolled through the limited data, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. She enlisted at 18, completed basic at Fort Benning, top of her class in everything, selected for advanced infantry training then. He frowned. Then there's a gap, 6 months where she's listed as in training, but no location, no details. Sniper school, Brennan said. Has to be, but not the standard pipeline. That's what's strange, sir. Her rifle qualification scores are listed as exempt. Exempt? Yes, sir. Not failed, not passed, just exempt, like the test didn't apply to her. Brennan leaned back in his chair, processing. Exempt meant she'd been pulled into something that operated outside normal evaluation protocols, something that tested skills the regular Army didn't have benchmarks for. After the training gap, Morris continued, she shows up in a unit designation I don't recognize. Task Force Mongoose. No base listed, no chain of command, just the name and a 4-year assignment window. Mongoose. Brennan had heard that name exactly once in a briefing about asymmetric operations in the Hindu Kush. Off-the-books teams that handled situations too sensitive for conventional units. The kind of thing you heard about in secure facilities and never mentioned again. He'd assumed it was rumor. Apparently, he'd been wrong. After Mongoose, Morris said, she gets reassigned here. No explanation, no transition notes. Just dropped into armory duty like she's rotating off a desk job. Brennan stood, pacing toward the window. Outside, the base continued its morning routine. Soldiers ran in formation. Helicopters lifted off from distant pads. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the desert cool. Pull the range logs, he said. I want to see her shooting records. Live fire, training, anything. Morris nodded and left. Brennan stayed at the window, watching the world move, thinking about Jack Hartley, thinking about the way Jack's hands had trembled the last time they'd met, years before his death, when Jack had already become a ghost haunting his own life. I had one shot, Jack had said, his voice hollow. One chance to make it right, and I missed. Brennan had tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, that the wind had shifted, that the intelligence had been wrong, that 9 men dying wasn't something one sniper could have prevented. Jack hadn't listened. Jack had never listened. And now Jack's daughter was wearing a badge that said she'd done what he couldn't. By 1400 hours, Brennan had what he needed. The range logs were sparse. Elena Hartley rarely used the training facilities. When she did, her targets were always at extreme distances. 800 meters, 1,000, 1,200, and every single shot was recorded the same way. Impact, confirmed. Center mass, not on target, not effective, just confirmed, center mass, every time, like the rifle was an extension of her nervous system, and missing wasn't a concept her body understood. Brennan sat in his office, reading through the data, feeling the weight of it settle into his chest like lead. There was a knock at the door. Come. Morris entered, followed by someone Brennan hadn't seen in 3 years. Colonel Harrison Greer, mid-50s, quiet in the way that dangerous people are quiet. The kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from something harder than granite and left out in bad weather. Sir, Morris said, this is Colonel Greer. He's from JSOC. He requested a meeting. Brennan stood. Colonel. Greer nodded once. General, I understand you've taken an interest in one of my former operators. Your operator? Was, Greer corrected. She's on loan to Ironcliff now, officially listed as Armory Support. Unofficially, he let the sentence hang. Unofficially, she's on standby, Brennan finished, for when you need someone who can do what no one else can. Exactly, Brennan crossed his arms. That badge, the 3,200-meter shot. Walk me through it. Greer's expression didn't change. That's classified, General. I have clearance. Not for this, you don't. The room went cold. Brennan felt his jaw tighten, felt the old combat instincts flaring up. Colonel, I knew her father. I know what that distance means, and I know that badge isn't something anyone gets by accident. Greer studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Jack Hartley was the finest sniper instructor the Marines ever produced, but he couldn't make the shots he trained others to take. It broke him. I know that. Then you know his daughter spent her entire life trying to finish what he started. Greer paused. And she succeeded. That badge is real, General. The shot is real. And if you're thinking about pulling her into some kind of evaluation or demonstration, you need to understand something. What's that? She's not wasted in an armory. She's exactly where she needs to be until the world needs her again. Brennan wanted to argue, wanted to say that talent like that belonged in the field, not behind a desk maintaining rifles for soldiers who couldn't shoot half as well. But something in Greer's eyes stopped him. The shot that earned her that badge, Greer said quietly. It wasn't a training exercise. It was a live operation. High-value target, hostages involved, no air support, no backup plan, just her, a rifle, and 6 hours to calculate something that shouldn't be possible. Brennan's breath caught. And? One shot, one kill, 16 hostages walked out alive. The words landed like physical blows. Brennan felt them in his chest, in his throat, in the space behind his eyes where Jack Hartley's ghost had lived for 34 years. Greer moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, General. Jack Hartley failed because he tried to save everyone. His daughter succeeds because she understands you can only save the ones you can reach. That's the difference between a dreamer and a warrior. He left. Brennan stood there, staring at the empty doorway, feeling something fundamental shift in his understanding of the world. That evening he returned to the armory. Most of the techs had gone to chow. Only a few remained, finishing maintenance logs, securing equipment for the night. Elena was still there. Same corner, same rifle, same methodical precision that suggested time didn't exist when the work mattered. Brennan approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back. She looked up when he was 10 feet away, her expression neutral, waiting. Hartley, sir. He stopped a few feet from her workspace. The rifle gleamed under the fluorescent lights, every surface clean, every component checked and double-checked. I spoke with Colonel Greer. Elena nodded once but said nothing. He told me about the shot, the one that earned you that badge. Another nod. Why didn't you say anything? Brennan asked. When I questioned you this morning, you could have explained, could have defended yourself. Elena set down the cleaning rod she'd been using, her movements precise. Respectfully, sir, I didn't need to defend myself. The badge is real. The record is real. Whether you believed it or not didn't change that. Brennan felt something between respect and irritation. Most soldiers would have jumped at the chance to prove themselves, to explain their accomplishments, to seek validation from a four-star general. Most soldiers would want credit, he said. I'm not most soldiers, sir. No, Brennan agreed quietly. You're not. He watched her work for a moment. The rifle was nearly reassembled now, each piece fitting together with mechanical certainty. Your father, Brennan said carefully, tried to make a shot like that once. 1991, Iraq, right after Desert Storm. There was a unit pinned down. Republican Guard had them zeroed. He calculated a 2,800-meter shot that should have taken out their commander. Elena's hand stilled. She didn't look up. He missed, Brennan continued, 14 inches low and left. 9 men died before air support arrived. He paused. I was his spotter that day, and I called the wind wrong. 9 knots, not 8. My math failed him. Now Elena looked up, her gray eyes meeting his. For the first time, he saw something other than professional neutrality. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. My father never blamed you, sir, she said quietly. He blamed himself. He carried those 9 names until they killed him. I know. Brennan's voice was rough. Heart attack 2013. I read the report. PTSD and guilt, Elena said. The doctor said his heart just gave out, but I think he'd been dying since that day in Iraq. Just took 22 years to finish. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared history and inherited burden. He trained me, Elena continued, still holding Brennan's gaze. From the time I was 8 years old, every day after school, every weekend, every summer. Wind reading, elevation calculations, breath control. He'd set up targets at impossible distances and make me calculate the shot before I was allowed to fire. That's why you're so good. That's why I understand the discipline required. She paused. My father was brilliant, sir, but he never forgave himself for being human, for making one mistake that cost lives. And that lack of forgiveness killed him more surely than any enemy ever could. Brennan felt the words land. And you? Do you forgive yourself when you miss? Elena's expression shifted, something dark crossing her features. I don't miss, sir. I can't afford to. Everyone misses eventually. Then I haven't reached eventually yet. The certainty in her voice was absolute. Not arrogance, just fact, delivered with the same weight as gravity or the speed of light. Brennan straightened. Don't let your father's ghost turn you into what he became, Hartley. You're better than that. With respect, sir, my father's ghost is the only reason I'm this good. I don't run from it. I use it. Brennan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Dismiss, Sergeant. Elena returned to her rifle. As Brennan walked toward the exit, he heard her voice, quiet but carrying. Sir? He turned. Thank you for telling me about the wind call. My father never knew that detail. Brennan felt something tighten in his chest. Would it have made a difference if he'd known? Elena thought about it. No, he would have found another reason to blame himself. That's who he was. And who are you? Elena's eyes were steady. I'm the weapon he trained, the one he needed to be, but couldn't. I finish what he started. Every shot, every time. Brennan left without another word. 3 weeks later, everything changed. The message came through official channels at 0600 on a Monday. VIP tour, congressional delegation, demonstration of advanced capabilities requested. Senator Randall Carver, Armed Services Committee, would be arriving in 72 hours. He wanted to see what America's tax dollars were buying. And specifically, he wanted to see the sniper with the impossible badge. Brennan read the directive twice, then called Morris into his office. This is a mistake, Brennan said, tossing the tablet onto his desk. Morris picked it up, scanned the text. Sir, we can't refuse a congressional request. I can delay it, cite operational security, training schedules, equipment availability. For how long? Long enough. General, Morris's voice was careful. With respect, Senator Carver chairs the committee that decides our budget. If we refuse this, he'll find other ways to make his displeasure known. Brennan knew Morris was right. Politics and military effectiveness lived in separate worlds, and politics always won when they collided. Fine, he said, schedule it, but keep it controlled. No media, minimal observers, and for God's sake, don't let anyone pressure her into something stupid. Morris nodded and left. Brennan sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the mountains in the distance, thinking about Jack Hartley and the day everything went wrong. Thinking about 9 names he'd carried for 34 years. Thinking about the daughter who'd turned her father's failure into fuel. He pulled out his phone and made a call to a number that didn't appear on any official directory. Greer, a voice answered. Clipped, efficient. It's Brennan. I've got a problem with one of your former operators. A pause. Hartley? You knew I'd call. I knew you'd eventually see that badge and start asking questions. Greer's voice carried no surprise. What do you need? I need to know if I can stop a congressional demonstration. Senator Carver wants her to perform like a trained SEAL for his committee. You can't stop it, General. She's on loan to your command. Technically, you have authority, but politically? Greer paused. You'd lose that fight. So what do I do? A long silence. Then, make sure she understands she doesn't owe them anything. No performance, no tricks. She takes the shot on her terms, or not at all. And if they push for more, distances she hasn't attempted, Greer's voice carried warning now. Then God help us all, because Elena Hartley doesn't know how to do anything halfway. If they push her, she'll push back in ways that'll rewrite every manual we've got. Your father figure role? Use it. Make sure she knows the difference between proving herself and proving a point. The line went dead. Brennan sat in the silence of his office, watching afternoon shadows stretch across the desert, and wondered if they were about to witness something extraordinary, or something catastrophic. Possibly both. The demonstration was scheduled for Thursday at 0900 hours. Elena learned about it Tuesday evening when Captain Morris found her in the armory, looking like a man delivering a death sentence he didn't believe in. Sergeant Hartley, I'm supposed to inform you that you've been requested personally to participate in a capabilities demonstration for visiting congressional staff. Elena didn't look up from the scope she was calibrating. Requested by who? Senator Randall Carver, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Morris shifted his weight. He read the classified brief on your record, wants to see what he called, and I quote, America's most lethal precision asset in action. Elena's hands stilled on the adjustment knob. Tell him no. I can't do that, Sergeant. This came down from the Secretary of Defense's office. It's not optional. She set down the scope with careful precision, the kind of control that suggested violence held in check by will alone. Captain, I'm not a performer. I don't shoot for applause. Morris looked genuinely sympathetic. I understand that, but this is bigger than either of us. They're talking about funding for next-generation sniper systems. Your demonstration could secure resources that save lives down the line. Or it turns me into a circus act and undermines everything I've worked for. Morris had no answer for that. He stood there, caught between duty and something that felt uncomfortably like conscience. Elena stood, grabbing her rifle case. When? Thursday, 900 hours, extended range facility. She walked past him without another word, leaving Morris alone in the armory, looking like he'd just kicked a dog that had never done anything but its job. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bunk in the barracks, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the base settling into its nocturnal rhythm. Distant voices, vehicle engines, the periodic crack of the perimeter fence swaying in the wind that never stopped in this part of the desert. Her mind ran through scenarios. The demonstration, the scrutiny, the inevitable questions about classified operations she couldn't discuss. The pressure to perform on demand, as if precision were a switch she could flip, instead of a discipline she'd spent 21 years cultivating. She hated it, but she also understood it. The military ran on politics as much as it ran on bullets, and sometimes soldiers had to be symbols whether they wanted to be or not. At 0500, she gave up on sleep and went to the range. The facility was empty, bathed in that gray pre-dawn light that made the world look like an old photograph. Elena moved through her preparation ritual with automatic precision. Rifle assembly, ammunition check, range cards. She set up targets at 1,000 meters, 1,500, and 2,000. Then she settled into position and began shooting. Each shot was meditation. Breath in, breathe out. Trigger press. Follow through. The rifle's recoil became a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. She fired until the sun rose, until her shoulder ached, until the rhythm of the work drowned out everything else. When she finally stopped, every target bore a cluster of impacts so tight they looked like a single ragged hole punched through steel. She was ready. She just wished she didn't have to be. Thursday morning arrived with the inevitability of artillery. Elena reported to the extended range facility at 0830, carrying her rifle case in a face that gave away nothing. The VIP platform was already packed. Senators in expensive suits that had never seen mud. Generals with chests full of ribbons. Defense contractors with sharp eyes and sharper interest in anything that might justify their next billion-dollar proposal. Cameras lined the observation deck. Journalists scribbled in notebooks. Someone had even set up a large monitor to display the downrange feed in real time, because apparently watching through binoculars wasn't theatrical enough. Elena ignored the stares, the whispers, the way Senator Carver leaned over to his aide and said something that made them both smile. She moved to the equipment staging area and began her setup with the same methodical efficiency she used whether anyone was watching or not. General Brennan was there, standing off to the side, arms crossed. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded once. She returned it. The range officer stepped forward with a microphone, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, today you'll witness a live-fire demonstration of advanced long-range marksmanship capabilities. Staff Sergeant Elena Hartley will engage targets at extended distances using a Barrett M82A1 anti-materiel rifle. Safety protocols are in effect. Please remain behind the yellow line at all times. Polite applause rippled through the VIPs. Elena tuned it out. She was already running calculations in her head. Temperature, 86 degrees. Humidity, 22%. Barometric pressure, 30.12 and steady. Wind, 8 knots from the northwest, gusting to 11. The math was always the same. Distance times drag coefficient times air density. Adjust for temperature gradients. Account for spin drift. Factor Coriolis effect. Because even the Earth's rotation mattered when you were trying to put a bullet through a target 2 miles away. She assembled her rifle with practiced hands. Barrel, bolt carrier group, recoil spring, each piece fitting together with mechanical certainty. Senator Carver's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Sergeant Hartley, can you tell us what makes you qualified for this kind of shooting? Elena didn't look up from her work. Training, sir. Experience. Discipline. I understand you recently completed a mission with a confirmed kill at nearly 3,000 meters. Is that accurate? Elena's hands paused for a fraction of a second. Then she continued working. I can't discuss classified operations, sir. Carver smiled, the kind politicians use when they'd already decided how the conversation would end. Of course, but hypothetically, could you make a shot like that here today? The platform went silent. Every eye turned to Elena. She finished attaching her scope, then stood, turning to face the senator directly. Hypothetically, sir, if the target conditions and tactical necessity aligned, yes. Then let's see it. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. Sir? Carver gestured toward the range with expansive confidence. Our furthest target is what, 2,000 meters? Let's make it interesting. Double it. The range officer stepped forward quickly, alarm clear in his voice. Senator, we don't have targets set beyond 2,500 meters. The range doesn't extend that far, and we haven't surveyed for safety considerations. Then put one there, Carver said, still smiling. Use a vehicle, a barrel, anything. I want to see if the reports are exaggerated or if we've actually got something worth the investment. Elena felt every eye on the platform turn toward her. She could see the calculation in their faces. This was a test, not of skill, but of obedience, of willingness to perform when ordered. General Brennan's voice cut through the tension. Senator, that's an unreasonable request. Environmental conditions aren't controlled. We haven't had time to properly survey the extended range. This goes beyond demonstration into reckless territory. General Brennan, Carver interrupted smoothly, I appreciate your concern, but we're here to see what our military is capable of. If Sergeant Hartley can't deliver under pressure, I need to know that before we allocate billions to programs based on her supposed capabilities. The words hung like a gauntlet thrown at Elena's feet. She could refuse, should refuse. This wasn't a tactical necessity, it was theater, political maneuvering disguised as validation. But she also knew what refusal would mean. Questions about her record, doubt about her capabilities, ammunition for budget cuts that would affect soldiers who had nothing to do with this spectacle. Elena looked at Brennan. He shook his head slightly, a silent plea to walk away. Then she looked at the range stretching into the desert, calculating distances, wind patterns, the angle of the sun burning higher into the morning sky. 4,000 meters, she said quietly. The platform erupted in murmurs. Carver's smile widened into something that looked like triumph. "I'm sorry, Sergeant." Elena turned to face him fully, her voice steady and clear. "You want to see what I can do, Senator? Set a target at 4,000 meters. I'll make the shot." The range officer's face went pale. "Sergeant, that's almost 2.5 miles. No one's ever made a shot like that in a training environment. The variables alone make it nearly impossible." "I'm aware of the variables, Sergeant Major," Elena said, her voice carrying an edge now. "Set the target. I'll handle the rest." Carver's expression shifted from surprise to something like eagerness. "You're serious?" "I don't make jokes about my job, sir." For a moment, no one moved. The desert wind kicked up dust devils in the distance. A helicopter passed overhead, rotors thumping the air. Then Carver nodded to his aide. "Make it happen." It took 90 minutes to set up the shot. A maintenance crew drove a decommissioned Humvee out to the 4,000-meter mark, positioning it broadside to the firing platform. They painted a 2-foot orange square on the door, bright against the vehicle's faded tan. Then they retreated, leaving the target alone in the vast expanse of desert. Through her scope, the Humvee looked like a child's toy, a speck of color against endless brown and tan, wavering in the heat shimmer that rose off the sand like water. Elena lay prone on the platform, rifle settled into her shoulder, breathing controlled. Around her, the VIPs had gone silent. Even the journalists had stopped taking notes. Everyone understood they were about to witness something that defied conventional wisdom, or watch a very public failure. Lieutenant Owen Fletcher lay beside her with the spotting scope, his voice low and meant only for her ears. "Elena, you don't have to do this. Carver's playing games. Walk away." "Can't," she said quietly. I pressed to her scope. "Why?" "Because if I walk away, they'll say I couldn't do it. And the next time someone's life depends on a shot everyone says is impossible, they won't call. They'll assume it can't be done." Fletcher was quiet for a moment. Then he settled deeper into his scope. "All right, wind is variable, 9 to 16 knots from the west. Temperature's climbing, 91 degrees now. Humidity dropped to 18%. Mirage is heavy. Heat distortion is going to affect the sight picture significantly." Elena adjusted her scope, compensating for the extreme elevation. At this distance, the bullet would drop nearly 80 feet. The flight time would exceed 8 seconds. The Earth's rotation would pull the round to the right. The wind would push it left. Temperature gradients at different altitudes would affect velocity. Humidity would change air density. All of it had to be calculated. All of it had to be accounted for. All of it had to be trusted. "Range confirmed at 4,019 meters, Fletcher said. "Target is stable." Elena's breathing slowed. Her heartbeat settled into the rhythm she'd trained for years to achieve. 48 beats per minute, 46, 44. The world narrowed to the view through her scope. The orange square wavering in the heat. Impossibly small. Impossibly far. She waited. Minutes passed. The VIPs shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. A camera clicked. The heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight. Elena ignored it all. She was searching for the moment, the alignment, the instant when wind, temperature, trajectory, and opportunity converged into a window so narrow that hesitation meant failure. 10 minutes stretched into 15. Senator Carver's voice drifted across the platform, impatient now. "How much longer is this going to?" Elena fired. The rifle's thunder shattered the desert silence. Recoil slammed through her body, absorbed by muscle and bone, trained to accept the punishment. The muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust that obscured everything for 2 heartbeats. Then stillness. Fletcher counted under his breath, tracking the bullet's flight through his spotting scope. 3, 4, 5, 6. Everyone on the platform held their breath. Seconds felt like hours. The desert held its secrets close. 7, 8. The radio crackled. A voice from the downrange observation team, tinny and distant. "Impact. Confirmed impact. Stand by for assessment." 10 seconds of silence that felt like drowning. Then, "Hit on target. Repeat. Confirmed hit on target. Impact inside the marked square." The platform erupted. Gasps, shouts. Someone started clapping, and then everyone was clapping. The sound building like a wave crashing against shore. Through the monitor's downrange feed, the orange square was clearly visible, and in its center, a ragged hole where the .50 caliber round had punched through steel and kept going. 4,019 meters. One shot, dead center. Senator Carver stood frozen, mouth slightly open, staring at the monitor like it had personally betrayed him. General Brennan's expression was unreadable, somewhere between pride and something that looked like concern. Defense contractors were already pulling out phones, making calls to headquarters. And Elena just lay there, breathing slowly, staring through her scope at the target she just hit, feeling nothing but emptiness. Because the shot didn't matter. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd just proven something she'd spent years trying to keep quiet. She wasn't just good, she was singular, and now everyone knew it. The aftermath was chaos. Journalists swarmed with questions flying like shrapnel. How did you calculate that? What went through your mind? Can you do it again? Defense contractors pulled Brennan aside, talking contracts and capabilities and funding proposals that started with 9 figures. Senator Carver recovered quickly, pivoting from skepticism to championship, already drafting talking points about American military excellence for the cameras. Elena packed her rifle in silence, ignoring the commotion, focusing on the mechanical ritual of disassembly and storage. Each piece wiped clean, each component checked. The same process whether anyone was watching or not. Fletcher appeared beside her, eyes still wide with adrenaline. "That was... Elena, I don't even have words. 4,000 meters in training conditions. Do you understand what you just did? You just rewrote every record book we have." She didn't respond, just kept packing her gear with methodical precision. "That shot is going to be studied for decades," Fletcher continued, his voice carrying a mix of awe and something close to fear. "The ballistics alone..." "Lieutenant," Elena's voice cut through his excitement like a blade. "It was a shot in controlled conditions, with time to prepare. It means nothing compared to the real thing." Fletcher fell silent, the enthusiasm draining from his face as he processed her words. Elena finished packing her case and stood, slinging it over her shoulder. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, measuring, calculating, commodifying, turning her into a thing instead of a person. She hated it. General Brennan intercepted her before she could leave, his expression grave. "Hartley, a word." They moved away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near the equipment shed. The celebration continued behind them, but it felt distant now, muffled. Brennan spoke first, his voice low. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless. It was necessary, sir." "Was it? Or did you just let them bait you into proving something you didn't need to prove?" Elena met his eyes. "If I'd refused, they would have assumed I couldn't do it. The mission in Karzan would have become a fluke, a lucky shot. And the next time someone needs the impossible, They won't believe it's possible. So you made yourself a target instead. I made myself undeniable. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, and she heard 30 years of command in that single exhalation. You know what happens now, don't you? Every senator, every contractor, every journalist is going to want a piece of you. They're going to pull you into briefings, demonstrations, interviews. They're going to turn you into a symbol. I won't let them. You won't have a choice, Hartley. You just became the most valuable propaganda asset the military has. They won't let you disappear back into an armory. The weight of his words settled over her like smoke. Elena looked out at the desert, at the heat shimmer rising off the sand, at the target still sitting 4,000 meters away, with a hole punched through its heart. What would you do, sir? She asked quietly. If you were me. Brennan considered the question, his gaze distant. I'd remember why I took the shot in the first place. Not for them, for the mission, for the people who needed me to be impossible. He paused. And I'd make sure that no matter what happens next, that's the only thing that matters. Elena nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Hartley, Brennan continued, that was the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed. And I've seen a lot of remarkable things. Thank you, sir. He studied her face, looking for something. Your father would be proud of you. Elena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. I hope so. Brennan left her there alone, near the equipment shed, standing in the afternoon sun, listening to the distant celebration still happening on the VIP platform. She could hear Carver's voice carrying across the desert, already spinning the narrative, already turning her into whatever story served his purposes. 4,000 meters, one shot, everything changed. Elena picked up her rifle case and walked toward the barracks, moving through the base like a ghost, invisible despite everything, because some truths didn't need acknowledgement, they just needed to be undeniable. And now hers was. That night she sat alone in her quarters. The lamp cast long shadows as she worked through her father's ritual. Bolt carrier apart first, always first, because Jack Hartley believed the heart of the rifle deserved first attention. Then the barrel, the recoil spring, each piece receiving the same care, whether fired once or 100 times. 20 years of this, every night, the meditation that kept her centered when nothing else could. She could still hear his voice sometimes, gruff and certain, explaining windage and elevation like they were mathematical absolutes instead of variables that shifted with every breath. Precision isn't about being perfect, he'd told her once, his hands steady on her shoulders as she lined up a shot at 600 meters. It's about being honest, honest about the conditions, honest about your capabilities, honest about what you can and can't control. The shot happens in your mind first. Everything else is just physics following through. He'd been right about that. He'd been wrong about so much else. Elena set down her cleaning rod and picked up the photograph she kept in her footlocker. Jack Hartley in desert camouflage, 1991, standing in front of a Humvee in Kuwait. Younger than she was now, eyes that hadn't yet learned what failure cost. 2 years after that photo was taken, he'd attempted the shot that would define the rest of his life. 2,800 meters across Iraqi desert, trying to save 9 men from a Republican Guard position that had them pinned. He'd missed by 14 inches. The men had died, and Jack Hartley had spent the next 22 years dying slowly from the inside out, carrying names and faces and the weight of a shot that refused to be forgotten. Elena had finished what he'd started, gone 1,200 meters further, proven that the impossible was just math nobody had done correctly yet. But sitting here in the lamplight, listening to the base settle into sleep around her, she wondered if proving it had been worth becoming exactly what her father had feared turning into. A weapon, a tool, something aimed and fired by people who would never understand the weight of what they were asking. She put the photograph away and returned to her work, hands moving through motions that required no thought, only the certainty that tomorrow she'd wake up and do it all again. Because that's what soldiers did. They carried the weight, and they didn't complain about how heavy it was. The summons came at 0600 the next morning, delivered by an MP who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Staff Sergeant Hartley, you're ordered to report to General Brennan's office immediately. Elena had been awake for an hour already, finishing a 6-mile run in the pre-dawn darkness. She showered, changed into a fresh uniform, and made the walk across base with her mind already running through scenarios. She arrived at Brennan's office 7 minutes later. The general sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. Colonel Greer occupied one of the chairs, the JSOC officer who'd vouched for her capabilities weeks ago. Beside him sat a woman Elena didn't recognize, mid-50s, civilian clothes, eyes that tracked movement like a predator measuring prey. Brennan gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Elena sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes moved between the three faces, reading tension, calculation, something heavier than routine. Sergeant Hartley, Brennan began, this is Dr. Rachel Morrison. She's a strategic planning consultant with the Department of Defense. She advises on asset deployment and capability integration. Morrison smiled thinly. In plain English, I help decide where rare talents are best utilized. Elena's jaw tightened fractionally. Ma'am, Morrison pulled out a tablet, scrolling through data with practiced efficiency. Your demonstration yesterday created quite a stir. The video has already been classified, but the senators who witnessed it are calling you a strategic asset, a force multiplier, the kind of capability that justifies entire programs. I'm a soldier, ma'am, Elena said carefully, not a capability. You're both, Morrison replied without looking up. And right now, very powerful people are trying to figure out how to use you most effectively. Elena looked at Brennan. Sir, permission to speak freely. Granted. I don't want to be used. I want to do my job the way I've always done it. Greer leaned forward, his voice carrying weight. Hartley, your job just changed. Whether you accept that or not, the moment you made that shot, you became visible. And visible assets get deployed differently. Then make me invisible again. Can't be done, Morrison said flatly. Too many people saw. Too many recordings exist. The proverbial cat is out of the bag, Sergeant. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. So what happens now? Brennan exchanged glances with Greer, then spoke carefully. Command wants to activate you full-time, pull you from armory operations and integrate you into a dedicated special operations task force. You train with Tier 1 units, deploy on high-value missions, operate under the kind of clearance that keeps your work classified, but your capabilities accessible. And if I refuse? The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. Morrison set down her tablet. Then you'll be reassigned to a training role. You'll spend the next 5 years teaching marksmanship fundamentals to recruits who will never take a shot that matters. Your skills will atrophy. Your value will diminish. And when the next impossible situation arises, someone else will try and fail because you weren't there. The words landed like body blows. Elena's breathing stayed controlled, but her hands tightened slightly in her lap, the only tell that she was processing implications that went far beyond her own preferences. You're saying, I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Brennan said quietly, but choices have consequences. And right now your choice is between embracing what you are or spending the rest of your career pretending you're something less. Elena looked down at her hands, clean, steady, calloused in the exact places where rifle and trigger had worn away softness over 21 years of repetition. The same hands that had just punched a hole through steel from 2.5 miles away. The same hands her father had trained to finish what he couldn't. How long do I have to decide? She asked. 72 hours, Morrison said. After that, personnel orders will be cut one way or another. Elena stood. Then I'll have my answer in 72 hours, ma'am. She saluted and left before anyone could respond. walking out into morning sunlight that felt too bright, too hot, too much like judgment. 3 days to decide the shape of the rest of her life. 3 days to choose between being the weapon they wanted or becoming irrelevant to everything that mattered. She walked toward the range, hands shoved in her pockets, mind churning through scenarios that all ended the same way. There was no good choice. There was only the mission. And Elena Hartley had never walked away from a mission in her life. Elena spent the next 72 hours doing what she always did when the world demanded answers she didn't have. She worked. The range became her sanctuary. Dawn to dusk, she ran scenarios, target identification drills, wind reading exercises, ballistic calculations that pushed the boundaries of what physics said was possible. Each shot was a conversation with her father's ghost. Each impact a small defiance against the inevitability of choice. On the second day, Master Sergeant Wyatt Sullivan found her there. He was 44, Delta Force through and through, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen things that would break lesser men and had simply kept walking. He leaned against the range tower, watching her work for 15 minutes before he spoke. "You shoot like someone running from something." Elena didn't break her rhythm. Breathe. Acquire. Fire. The target at 1,800 meters rang with the impact. "Maybe I am." "Your father?" She finally looked up surprised. "You knew him?" "Of him." Jack Hartley was a legend in sniper circles, also a cautionary tale. Sullivan moved closer, hands in his pockets. "They say he was the best instructor the Marines ever produced. Couldn't make the shots himself, but he could teach others to make them." "That true?" Elena cycled the bolt, chambering another round. "He could make them. He just couldn't forgive himself when he missed." "And you?" "I don't miss." Sullivan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone misses eventually, Sergeant. The question is what you do after." Elena lowered her rifle, finally giving him her full attention. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm the team leader for Task Force Wraith, the unit they want to assign you to." He paused. "And I need to know if you're coming because you want to, or because you don't know how to say no." The honesty caught her off guard. Most officers would have sold the assignment, talked about honor and duty and the privilege of serving with elite units. Sullivan just stood there, waiting for truth. "I don't know yet," Elena admitted. "Fair enough." Sullivan nodded toward the target downrange. "But I'll tell you this, Wraith doesn't need performers. We need warriors who understand that perfect shots don't guarantee perfect outcomes. Your father's mistake wasn't missing. It was thinking one shot could fix everything." He left her with those words hanging in the desert air. On the third day, Elena made her decision. She walked into Brennan's office at 0800 hours, stood at attention, and delivered her answer with the same precision she applied to everything else. "I accept the assignment, sir, with conditions." Brennan leaned back in his chair. Morrison and Greer were there again, a tribunal of careers and consequences. "Soldiers don't negotiate conditions, Sergeant." "I'm not negotiating, sir. I'm stating the terms under which I'll be most effective." Greer's eyebrow raised fractionally. Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. Elena pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and set it on Brennan's desk. "First, I maintain autonomy over mission acceptance. If I assess a shot as tactically unsound or unnecessarily risky, I can refuse without repercussion. Second, no public demonstrations, no media access, no congressional tours. I work in the shadows, or I don't work at all. Third, I retain my current rank and pay grade. No promotions tied to publicity or political maneuvering." Morrison looked at the paper like it had personally offended her. "This is highly irregular." "So is making a shot at 4,000 meters, Elena replied evenly. "You want irregular capabilities. You accommodate irregular requirements." Brennan read through the conditions, his expression unreadable. Then he looked up at Greer. "Colonel?" Greer nodded slowly. I can work with this. JSOC operates on mission effectiveness, not publicity. As long as she delivers results, command won't care about the rest. Morrison still looks skeptical. And if she refuses a mission we deem critical, then you find someone else, Elena said flatly. There are other snipers, other options. But if you want me specifically, you accept that I'm not a bullet you fire indiscriminately. I'm a precision instrument, and precision requires judgment. The room fell silent. Outside, the base continued its morning rhythm, formations moving, vehicles rolling, the machinery of military life that never stopped for individual choices. Then Brennan picked up a pen and signed the paper. Approved. Greer, draw up the orders. Morrison, inform command that Hartley's conditions are non-negotiable. Morrison opened her mouth to protest, seemed to think better of it, and simply nodded curtly before leaving. Greer stood, extending his hand to Elena. Welcome to the team, Sergeant. You report to Fort Bragg in 2 weeks for integration training. Elena shook his hand, feeling the weight of commitment settle into her bones. Understood, sir. After Greer left, she stood alone with Brennan. The general studied her with eyes that had seen too many soldiers make too many choices for too many wrong reasons. You know they'll push back on those conditions, he said quietly. Try to erode them over time. I know. And you'll have to fight to maintain them constantly. I know that too. Brennan stood, moving around the desk. Then why agree at all? Why not just walk away? Elena thought about Lieutenant Fletcher's words after the 4,000-meter shot, about Sullivan's observation that her father's mistake was thinking one perfect shot could fix everything, about the 72 hours she'd spent running from a choice that was really no choice at all. Because hiding from what I am doesn't make me less dangerous, she said finally. It just makes me useless. And I'd rather be dangerous and purposeful than safe and forgotten. Brennan nodded slowly, something like respect crossing his features. That's the most honest thing I've heard all week. He extended his hand. Good luck, Hartley. And remember, no matter what happens, you're still a soldier. Not a weapon, not a symbol, a soldier. Elena shook his hand, feeling the certainty in his grip. I won't forget, sir. She spent her last 2 weeks at Ironcliff closing loops. The armory had to be handed off to her replacement, a young specialist named Torres, who looked terrified at the prospect of maintaining weapons Elena had spent months calibrating to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. She walked him through every detail with patience that surprised them both. Torque specifications, cleaning protocols, the particular quirks of the Barrett that required attention beyond the manual's guidance. Why does this matter so much? Torres asked on the final day, watching her demonstrate the proper sequence for barrel maintenance. You're not going to be here to see if I do it right. Elena paused, cleaning rod in hand. Because the next person who uses this rifle might need it to work perfectly. And if it doesn't, someone dies who didn't have to. That's why it matters. Torres nodded, understanding settling into his young face like responsibility finding its shape. On her last evening, Elena ran the perimeter one final time. 6 miles of fence line, boots on packed earth, breathing in air that tasted like diesel and dust, and the particular smell of a military base that had been her home for 8 months. She'd been invisible here, safe, protected by routine and the kind of obscurity that lets you do your work without becoming a story people told. That version of her life was over now. The next morning, she loaded her gear into a nondescript transport truck, rifle case, duffel bag, footlocker containing everything that mattered, which wasn't much. The driver was a civilian contractor who didn't ask questions and didn't make small talk. Perfect. As the truck rolled through the gates, Elena looked back one last time. Ironcliff Base sat quiet in the early morning light. Formations running PT, vehicles heading to the motor pool. The rhythm of routine continuing without her, exactly as it should. She'd been a ghost here. Now she was going somewhere that needed ghosts who could shoot. Fort Bragg hit like a wall of humidity and expectation. The truck dropped Elena at the main gate just after 1400 hours. The base sprawled across thousands of acres, home to Special Operations Command, units whose names never appeared on any roster, and the kind of soldiers who made difficult look routine. Captain Reeves met her at the processing center. Young, competent, eyes that suggested he'd already seen enough combat to know when not to waste words. Staff Sergeant Hartley? Yes, sir. Captain Reeves, I'm your liaison for integration. Follow me. They moved through the base in silence, passing training facilities that looked more like urban warfare sets than military infrastructure. Kill houses for close-quarters combat, ranges that stretched to horizons, helicopter pads where MH-60 sat ready with rotors folded like predatory birds at rest. Reeves led her to a nondescript building marked only with a number. Inside, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Secure facility, soundproofed walls, the kind of place where classified conversations happen daily and no one ever repeated them. He stopped at a conference room door. Your team's waiting. They've been briefed on your capabilities. Most of them are skeptical. Good, Elena said. Skepticism keeps you alive. Reeves smiled slightly. Prove them wrong, Sergeant. He opened the door. 5 faces turned toward her. 4 men, 1 woman. All of them looked like they'd been carved from something harder than granite and left out in weather that would break normal humans. The man at the head of the table stood, Master Sergeant Wyatt Sullivan, the one who'd found her at the range, who'd told her the truth instead of selling her a story. Sergeant Hartley, have a seat. Elena sat, setting her rifle case on the floor beside her chair with careful precision. Sullivan gestured around the table. These are your teammates. Bridget Donovan, explosives and breaching specialist. Graham Walsh, communications and intelligence. Dr. Nathaniel Pierce, combat medic. And you've met Lieutenant Fletcher. Owen Fletcher nodded from across the table, the young forward observer who'd spotted for her at both the embassy mission and the 4,000-meter demonstration. His presence was surprising, but somehow reassuring. Each operator acknowledged her with minimal movement. No smiles, no welcome speeches, just assessment from people who knew that reputations meant nothing until proven under fire. Sullivan sat back down. We've read your file, what wasn't redacted anyway. Impressive shots, impressive record. But we need to establish something right now. This isn't a solo act. You don't take shots without coordination. You don't make calls without consulting the team. Clear? Clear, Elena said. But I also don't take shots I'm not confident in. If the tactical picture doesn't align with capability, I'll say so. A woman down the table, Bridget Donovan, leaned forward. Stocky, powerful, with the kind of arms that suggested she could breach doors by simply walking through them. You saying you know better than the mission commander? I'm saying I know my limitations, and I won't pretend otherwise just to make someone feel comfortable. The room went quiet. Then Donovan smiled, genuinely this time. Good. Last sniper we had would take any shot command asked for. Got 2 hostages killed in Yemen because he couldn't admit the angle was wrong. Sullivan nodded slowly. We work on trust here, Hartley. You trust us to get you into position and keep you alive. We trust you to tell us what's possible and what's suicide. Can you do that? Yes, Sergeant. Then welcome to Task Force Wraith. We deploy in 3 days. Training starts now. The next 72 hours were the most intense of Elena's career. They ran her through scenarios that made her previous training look like basic drills. Hostage rescue in urban environments where civilians moved unpredictably. Target interdiction during active firefights with friendly forces danger close. Counter-sniper operations against trained adversaries who knew exactly what they were doing. Every exercise pushed her to the edge of her capabilities and then kept pushing. But she held. On the second day, Sullivan put her in a simulation. Rooftop overwatch while the team assaulted a building 300 meters away. Hostile snipers in elevated positions. Civilians moving through the streets. A target that had to be neutralized before the breach or the entire team died in the kill zone. Elena identified the hostile sniper in 8 seconds. Everyone stopped. Sullivan played back the footage, watching her eyes move across the digital landscape with predatory precision. "How?" he asked simply. "Shadow inconsistency," Elena replied. Everyone else on that rooftop was casting shadows consistent with the sun angle. His was off by 3 degrees. Meant he was using artificial concealment. Walsh, the intel specialist, whistled low. "That's not just good, that's scary." "That's paying attention," Elena corrected. "My father taught me that the environment always tells the truth. You just have to listen." On the 3rd day, they gave her the real test. Live fire exercise, actual targets, decommissioned vehicles placed at ranges from 800 to 2,400 meters, variable wind, time pressure, the team moving through a simulated combat zone while Elena provided overwatch from a ridgeline. She took 11 shots in 30 minutes, 10 hits. One miss when a thermal gust shifted mid-flight and she didn't compensate fast enough. When it was over, Sullivan climbed up to her position, breathing hard from the elevation gain. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That miss," he said finally. "What happened?" "Wind shear. Thermal layers shifted. I didn't compensate fast enough." "What would you do different?" "Wait 3 more seconds. Let the gust pass. Take the shot in the calm window." Sullivan nodded. "And if 3 seconds meant the team died?" Elena met his eyes without hesitation. "Then I'd take the shot and accept the odds. But I'd rather wait and guarantee the hit." Sullivan studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "You'll do, Hartley. You'll do just fine." She shook it, feeling calluses that matched her own, feeling approval that had been earned instead of given. For the first time since leaving Ironcliff, Elena felt like she belonged. The deployment came 18 hours after the final training exercise. No warning, no preparation time beyond what they'd already done. Just Sullivan appearing in the barracks at 0200 hours, his face grave in the emergency lighting. "Wheels up in 90 minutes. Full kit. This is real world." Elena was packed in 7 minutes. The rest of the team moved with the same efficient silence, checking gear, loading weapons, speaking only when necessary. The briefing happened on a C-17 somewhere over the Atlantic. Sullivan stood at the front of the cargo bay, tablet in hand, his voice cutting through the engine noise with practiced clarity. 12 hours ago, American journalist Kelly Morrison was kidnapped by militant forces in the Sahel region. She's being moved through open desert to an execution site. We have a 14-hour window before they broadcast her murder to the world. He pulled up satellite imagery. Vast expanse of sand and rock. A single road cutting through nothing. Heat shimmer visible even in the still photograph. Ground assault isn't viable. The terrain offers no cover approach. Airstrike risks killing the hostage. We have one option. Sullivan looked directly at Elena. Precision fire from extreme range. Elena felt every eye in the cargo bay turn toward her. "Estimated distance?" she asked, her voice steady. 4,200 to 4,600 meters. Conditions will be hostile. Variable wind up to 27 knots. Temperature exceeding 100 degrees. You'll have maybe one shot before they realize they're under fire and execute her. The cargo bay went silent, except for the drone of engines. Fletcher spoke up from beside her. "Sarge, that's beyond anything we've attempted operationally. The longest confirmed combat shot on record is 3,500 meters." "I'm aware of the records, Lieutenant," Sullivan said quietly. Then to Elena, "Can you make it?" Elena thought about her father, about the shot he'd attempted at 2,800 meters that had haunted him until it killed him, about the promise she'd made at his funeral to finish what he'd started, about every hour of training, every calculation, every moment of discipline that had brought her to this exact question. "Get me there," she said. "I'll make it." They inserted by helicopter at dawn, landing on a ridge that overlooked the desert expanse like God's own sniper platform. The team moved on foot for 40 minutes, climbing steadily toward the position Sullivan had identified from satellite imagery. The heat was already brutal, 104 degrees in climbing, the kind of dry that pulled moisture from your body faster than you could replace it. Elena set up her position with the precision of ritual. Rifle assembled, sensors deployed, ballistic computer calibrated. Each action performed in the exact sequence her father had drilled into her 2 decades ago. Fletcher sat up beside her with the spotting scope, his hands steady despite the stakes they both understood. Range is going to be variable depending on where they stop, he said quietly. Anywhere from 4.2 to 4.6. Wind is worse than intel suggested, gusting between 18 and 27 knots, shifting northwest to west. Thermals are chaotic. Elena nodded, already running preliminary calculations. At 4,500 meters, the bullet would drop more than 120 feet. Flight time would exceed 8.5 seconds. Every variable that could complicate a shot was present and amplified. "This is impossible," Fletcher said, and it wasn't a judgment, just an observation of physical reality. "My father thought the same thing about 2,800 meters," Elena replied. Turned out he was just asking the wrong questions. They waited. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Sweat evaporated before it could soak through clothing. The scope's image wavered with heat shimmer, making the distant terrain look liquid and uncertain. At 0847 hours, Graham Walsh's voice crackled through Elena's earpiece. "Wraith 1, be advised, we're picking up intercepted communications suggesting this may be more than a simple execution." Sullivan's voice came back immediately. "Explain." "There's chatter about a coordinated operation. The journalist might be bait. Delta QRF is inbound for rescue attempt. If our shot alerts hostile forces to our presence, there's an ambush element positioned to engage the rescue team." Elena felt her pulse kick up for the first time. Not from fear, from the sudden recalculation of stakes. "How many in the ambush force?" Sullivan asked. "Estimated 20 combatants. If they engage the QRF in open terrain, casualties will be catastrophic." Fletcher looked at Elena, his face pale. "If we take the shot on the convoy, we might trigger the ambush. 20 Delta operators could die." Sullivan's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Hartley, this is your call. You have the scope. What's your assessment?" Elena closed her eyes, running through scenarios with the speed of someone who'd trained their entire life for exactly this kind of impossible choice. Her father had tried to save everyone, had attempted the heroic shot, the one that would rescue the pinned unit and end the threat simultaneously. He'd failed, and 9 men had died because heroism didn't account for wind gusts and human limitation. She opened her eyes. "I need the ambush commander's position," she said quietly. Walsh came back 15 seconds later. "Thermal imaging shows what we believe is the command element 4,300 meters northwest of your position. Dug in, concealed." Fletcher's voice was almost a whisper. "Elena, that's an even harder shot, worse angle. The journalist will have a chance if we collapse the ambush first," Elena interrupted. She looked at Fletcher directly. "My father tried to save everyone with one shot. I'm not making that mistake. We save who we can save." Sullivan's voice carried something that might have been respect. "Take the shot when ready." Elena adjusted her scope, tracking northwest from the convoy position. Through the wavering heat, through the impossible distance, she searched for the signature that would mark a command position. There, a slight aberration in the terrain, shadow depth wrong, ground color inconsistent. Someone had dug in carefully, but not carefully enough for someone who'd spent 20 years learning to read what the environment was really saying. "Range to ambush commander," she said. Fletcher shifted his scope. Several seconds passed. 4,287 meters. The number hung in the air like a death sentence, or a promise, depending on how you chose to hear it. Elena settled deeper into her position. Breathing slowed. Heartbeat dropped. 44 beats per minute. 42. 40. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, to mathematics that had to be perfect, because imperfect meant 20 families would get folded flags instead of phone calls saying their soldiers were coming home. She thought about her father one last time, about Jack Hartley attempting the impossible and failing because he tried to be a hero instead of a warrior. She thought about General Brennan's confession that his win call had been wrong, that guilt could be shared but never divided. She thought about Sullivan's words, that her father's mistake wasn't missing, but thinking one shot could fix everything. Elena exhaled halfway, held it, let the moment arrive instead of forcing it, and pulled the trigger. The rifle roared. Recoil slammed through her body like judgment. The muzzle blast kicked up sand and stone, and heat shimmered air. Then silence. Fletcher counted. 3, 4, 5, 6, 4,287 meters away. Physics and discipline and 21 years of preparation converged into a single point. 7, 8, 9. The radio crackled. Walsh's voice, tight with adrenaline. Impact confirmed. Target down. Ambush element is breaking cover. They're disorganized. Sullivan immediately. QRF, you are cleared hot. Ambush element is compromised. Through her scope, Elena watched the convoy in the distance. The militants with Kelly Morrison looked confused, searching for a threat they couldn't identify. The woman was still alive, still bound, still terrified, but the ambush that would have killed 20 American soldiers was collapsing into chaos. Elena cycled the bolt, chambered another round, shifted her aim back to the convoy. Range to convoy leader, she said. Fletcher, 2,100 meters, a gift compared to what she'd just done. Elena found the target, the man standing closest to Kelly Morrison, weapon raised, looking around frantically. She fired. 2.1 seconds later, he dropped. The remaining militants scattered. Kelly Morrison ran, and Delta's QRF swept in during the confusion, securing the area in under 90 seconds. Fletcher collapsed back from his scope. Both shots, both hits, 4,287 and 2,100. That's not possible. Elena lowered her rifle, hands steady, breathing controlled. My father taught me that impossible is just discipline nobody's applied correctly yet. I just proved him right. Sullivan's voice came through on the radio. Wraith 1, this is command. Journalist secured. QRF reports 0 casualties. Ambush neutralized. Mission success. A pause. Outstanding work. Elena didn't respond. She was already breaking down her rifle, packing her gear, preparing for exfiltration. Because the shots were done, the mission was complete. And whether anyone called it outstanding or impossible or legendary didn't change the only fact that mattered. 20 American soldiers were going home alive. Kelly Morrison was going home alive. And Elena Hartley had proven that her father's legacy wasn't failure. It was teaching someone else to succeed where he couldn't. The week after the mission, a letter arrived through classified channels. No return address. Just a single page, handwritten in careful English. Staff Sergeant Hartley, my name is Amira. I am the mother of Hassan, the boy who was injured in Kandahar. The doctors say he will walk again. They say the fragment missed the bone by centimeters. They say he was very lucky. I am writing because the American officer who came to our home told me your name. He said you asked about my son every day until you knew he would live. He said you carry a photograph of Hassan to remember what precision means. I want you to know, I do not blame you. You stopped the man who killed my husband. You stopped the man who would have killed my son eventually. The wound Hassan bears is the price of our freedom. He understands this. I understand this. Thank you for asking about him. Thank you for caring that he lived. Amira Elena kept the letter in her footlocker, Next to the photograph of her father, two reminders, two weights, one of failure, one of grace, and both necessary to stay human. 6 months later, Elena stood in the Pentagon, wearing dress uniform and a silver star she tried to refuse. The Secretary of Defense had insisted. The ceremony was small, closed to media, exactly as her conditions specified. General Brennan pinned the medal to her chest, his hands steady, his eyes carrying something that looked like pride mixed with concern. "You become exactly what we hoped," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Don't lose yourself in it." "I won't, sir." After the ceremony, he pulled her aside. "Command is offering you retirement, full honors. You've exceeded every expectation. No one would question if you wanted to step away." Elena thought about Montana, about mountains that didn't demand anything except that you respected them, about silence that wasn't filled with the weight of shots that might need taking. "I'll take it," she said, "but with one condition." Brennan almost smiled. "You and your conditions. When the impossible call comes, when lives are on the line and no one else can make the shot, you call me, and I'll answer." Brennan nodded slowly. "Some purposes don't retire. They just wait for the moment that matters." Exactly. 2 years after that, Elena lived on a small ranch outside Billings, Montana, the kind of place where the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and the only sounds were wind through grass and the occasional distant cattle. She ran a private marksmanship school, vetted students only, military, law enforcement, people who understood that precision was discipline made visible. She taught them what Jack Hartley had taught her: wind reading, elevation calculations, the mathematics of ballistics. But more than that, she taught them what Jack had never quite understood himself: that missing didn't make you a failure, that perfect execution didn't guarantee perfect outcomes, that being human wasn't weakness, it was the foundation of judgment. Her rifle stayed in its case on the wall, cleaned weekly, ready but not needed. Sullivan called once a month, never about missions, just checking in the way sergeants do when they've seen someone almost break and watch them choose not to. "You teaching them the shadow angle trick?" he'd asked last month. "Teaching them to pay attention," Elena had replied. "Same thing my father taught me. The environment always tells the truth." "He'd be proud of you, Hartley." "You already told me that." Bears repeating. A pause. "We're running a new operator through integration next week. Kid's got potential but thinks he's invincible. Could use your input." "I'm retired, Wyatt." "I know. Just thought I'd ask." Another pause. "Offer stands, whenever you're ready." "I'll keep that in mind." She always said she'd keep it in mind, and Sullivan always knew what that meant. Until the day a young woman in Army uniform appeared at her door, sent by Sullivan with a message Elena had been expecting and dreading in equal measure. "Ma'am, Task Force Wraith needs you. The situation requires—" The young soldier paused, searching for words. "The impossible." Elena looked past her, at the Montana mountains rising in the distance, at the sky that went on forever, at the life she'd built from discipline in distance. Then she looked at the rifle case on the wall. "Tell Wyatt I'm retired." "He said you'd say that, ma'am. He also said to remind you, some purposes don't retire. They just wait for the moment that matters." Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to the case, opened it, and began the ritual she'd performed 10,000 times. The young soldier watched with wide eyes. "Ma'am, does that mean—" "Tell him I'll be there in 24 hours, Elena said, her hands moving through the familiar motions. "And tell him he's right. Some purposes don't retire." Because Jack Hartley had taught her to shoot. General Brennan had taught her to choose. Task Force Wraith had taught her to trust. And she'd taught herself that legacy wasn't what you achieved. It was what you enabled others to achieve. And when the impossible became necessary, when lives hung in the balance and mathematics met mortality, there was only one answer that mattered. Yes. Always yes. The rifle clicked together in her hands, familiar as breathing, heavy as history. Elena Hartley looked out at the mountains one more time, then picked up her phone and made the call that would take her back into the shadows, where she belonged, where she'd always belonged, where impossible was just another word for the shot nobody else could make, until she did.